Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So this video is about the activated brain, neuroplasticity windows, heightened emotions, critical periods, and sensitive periods. If these things sound intimidating, I assure you, I'll explain in a way that's very simple. You'll understand it very well. I'm not a neuroscientist. I am not a brain surgeon. I came across a video where this gentleman was talking about these things as they pertain to Joshua and Romans, certain parts of those books in the Bible. And I found it to be interesting, and I talk about neuroplasticity here and there over the years, so I decided to look more into it. This is not the center part of my research or something, but it proves my point. It overkills my point that I've been overkilling for many years. Why people have been living lives that are very foolish. Why 189,000 people die every day after wasting their lives. So let's get into this. So let's start with a neuroplasticity window. So let me read a quote here from peer-reviewed research from PubMed Central. A neuroplasticity window, commonly referred to in peer-reviewed literature as a critical period or sensitive period, is defined as a specific developmental time frame during which the brain exhibits heightened sensitivity to environmental stimuli, allowing for rapid and profound structural and functional reorganization. So basically that's probably AI kind of extrapolating certain information from the PubMed article, but that explanation is sound. It's also consistent with the explanation of the gentleman in the video that I saw on YouTube. So basically what it's saying is the neuroplasticity window, right, the word that we're using here, the phrase that we're using here, is commonly referred to as a critical period or a sensitive period. These two things aren't the same thing here. But when you're talking about a neuroplasticity window, say, oh, that, and when you talk about it in a certain way, it says, oh, that's a critical period. That's a sensitive period. We'll get to that. It's basically a specific developmental time frame, right? A certain time period, which where the brain exhibits heightened sensitivity, increased sensitivity to environmental stimuli. You know, the things that you process from the environment. Okay, this is key when it comes to trauma-based mind control. Say someone was molested when they're a young kid. The brain's in a heightened state, a critical state, a sensitive state. There's a certain critical period of time, a sensitive period of time, and it changes the brain wiring, its structure to some degree, and its function. So it allows for rapid and profound structural and functional reorganization. I mean, keep in mind the brain's like a muscle. Say if I worked out my bicep, right, its structure and its function would change. It would increase my function relative to the exercise that I'm doing. And so it is with the brain in this heightened state. Right? Think about animals in nature. A lion, it gets angry, right? How did the lion evolve to be a lion? Well, it has everything to do with neuroplasticity windows, right? And those sensitive periods, right? And those critical periods. So let's get a definition for a critical period to overkill this. So let's talk about a sensitive period, and we'll end this video here. A critical period is a strict limited window where specific environmental input is required for the proper development of a brain circuit. If this input is absent or deficient, the function served by the circuit may be permanently compromised. Think in terms of evolution. Right? If you have one group of people that's doing martial arts better than everyone else, like in Nigeria, okay, and they're intensely, sparring and going to war, and other people aren't doing that. So they've compromised their ability over generations to compete with them. And that's nature's way. That's nature's way. That's God's decision. God gave them free will. They chose to do that. God said that's how it works. That's the mechanism that God is using. It's one of the mechanisms that God is using is the neuroplasticity window, the critical period, the sensitive period. These are fancy words, yes, but once you get used to them, it's just like it becomes part of your, vocabulary, your conversation. This is something you should bring up a lot. These are objective facts. a sensitive period, a more flexible time period where environmental experiences have the greatest impact on brain circuitry. But changes can still occur, though with greater effort later in life. So I started to challenge them on their arguments about depression. They said depression had to do with a chemical imbalance in the brain, which is oversimplification, and they specifically started talking about serotonin, okay, and reuptake inhibitors, what have you. And I said, as I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at it as a martial artist, I said, I know people very well. As somebody who used to interact with people in the streets as the top martial artist, I said, no, I'm the expert on this. They don't know what they're talking about. The people who would make that argument are morally deficient, therefore they're insufficient when it comes to their job and their duties. Because they know better. That argument is rubbish. They know that there's environmental factors, what have you, right? There's background stressors, what have you. And so when I came across this one gentleman, I think it was an Asian gentleman, I can't remember who it was, but he made the argument that that's not how it works. The brain works in circuits more than the people who are making that argument seem to appreciate or, what have you. And I said that is more like what's going on, right? The brain is like this one big processing center. And there's circuits, right? The different components of the brain are connected in various ways, right? If you look at the frontal lobe, they often describe it together, and there's different components of it, okay? And these components control mood and sexual behavior, movement, okay, emotions, what have you. So I said, I don't believe their explanation. They're using intellectual jargon and their fancy degrees to say, hey, we're the experts, and everyone's suffering as a result. Because what depression is and what causes it, these are huge issues that affect so many people, affects everybody in various ways. I said, you can't just chop it up to that, and then here's this drug, and that's stupid. There's serious problems in society, and I started making songs and speeches where I said the disorder is in society, first and foremost. It's in the structure of society. It's in the function of society. And then as it structures and functions a certain way, and there's certain activity going on, then the structural and functional organization of your brain, right, and the activity of your brain are very much affected. And over time, you have certain effects like feeling a prolonged sadness. I said that in the vast majority of cases is a problem, not something they refer to as biological dysfunction in that context, where they say it's this kind of hereditary disorder, and they try to make racial supremacist arguments and expert arguments, and there's secret societies and social clubs controlling who socializes with who fraternizes with who. The word social starts with the word sow, like sow your seed. And saying, so what? They say, why should we care about that? So what? And there's hyper concern with this idea, and they look so stupid. It's like these wig-wearing colonists, no offense to anybody, but they look dumb. When we look at the history book, we say, what's their problem? Why are you massacring the Native Americans, enslaving black people? Okay, why are you using your people as cannon fodder to just look like this narcissistic mass of stupidity? And you kept these people of color out of colleges, and you say, what did they invent? No. And you rewrite history, and they look just so stupid. To this day, they look stupid. Now, I went kind of way over time here, but I want you people to understand these ideas, right? What is the activated brain? So when I did martial arts, right, that's part of what the gentleman was arguing in his video. He didn't say martial arts, but he said that when you incorporate different activities, right, movement, okay, like martial art movements, the most profound and important movements the body does has to do with making love and martial arts. Those are the two main things. When you incorporate these martial arts, because you're not going to, do it in terms of sex. That's sex magic. That's stupidity. Okay, you do it in terms of martial arts in the divine order, and you convey focus, moral intensity in the bedroom. And of course, you have the option whether to do it or not do it. Okay, that's why God gave you free will, and they're not supposed to interfere with you like they're interfering with me. Okay, trying to make sure people shun me, saying do it our way first. They're not supposed to do that. That's God's law first. It's common sense, and then it's the Constitution. It should be very clear to you. And so as a result, we have this activity in society that's rather abhorrent. The so-called intellectual crowd, the academics, bunch of idiots. The governing class, stupid as hell. Okay, the churches, mosques, synagogues, okay, all the temples, all the different, agnostics, philosophies, are they filling us? Well, you know them by their fruit. To be diplomatic in this video, I won't answer that question. Okay, but it's safe to say that they're not doing a good enough job. That's for sure. And no. Let me go ahead. No. I'm being too diplomatic. No, I'm being too diplomatic here. I'm going to go ahead and say they're failing you. I've said it many times, and I said, well, maybe in this video, I'll go ahead and say they're failing you. Okay. So you have these sensitive periods, right? Your environmental experiences, your experiences. It says right here that your brain activity, it's even structural and functional reorganization and organization has everything to do with the activated brain, these important time periods. And that's another way of saying, in a sense, it's a fancy way of saying, hey, when something critical happens in your life, like you decide to be a martial artist and you start changing your life and you start moving in the spirit of righteousness, that your brain is reorganizing, right? In structural and functional reorganization, there's the reorganization of brain activity. It's something that you know already. As a martial artist, I said I see that happening in real time better than any MRI, EEG, any brain scan, any technology. I see it happening on a profound level. You get a geek looking at a computer, they're not seeing what I'm seeing when I look at you.